Hello, this is Christian. Welcome to Angular. In this video, I'll talk about services and dependency injection in Angular. Here is a picture to show you how data can be passed from one component to another component, especially from the parent component to the child component here through this input-output decorators. Sometimes you don't have this option though. When this option is gone, then you have to rely on other methods. And one of the most popular methods is these services or dependency injection, where you can inject a service to a component this way. A service can be anything like a data source or a, DB connection or other functions or very useful services that you want to share across multiple components. So when you do this way, you can share the service through one or more components this way. Now a service is usually a singleton. We inject that into the program. It's a singleton, meaning that it's one copy only throughout the entire application, so they can all consume the same service. So if you make any changes to the service, all the other components also have that reflected on their component as well. So kind of be careful when you use it. There's pros and cons to using it as well, but usually it's really useful service. So here's another diagram to show you where these services can be injected. So I'm not talking about, so we're not dealing with like multiple applications on the same site or the same page. You can have, more than one applications running at the same time. When that happens, you can also inject services that can, be transferred across multiple apps as well. But here, I'm just talking about just a single application. So a service can be injected at the root level here and shown in pink. When you inject it at root level, the single copy here is available through the entire application. So all the module, all the components in the application can receive or can use that service if they want to. And you can also inject that into the module level. Now this is usually kind of common when you have a lazy load module or a group of modules that you want to load much later in the program. If you don't ever use that module, then you don't need to load it, right? So when that happens, if you use this procedure or this method, then that module will have its own copy of that service. And a third way is you can inject these services directly into the component themselves. By doing this way, though, the component has the highest precedence, which means it will override any of the other services here. So that means they will have their own local copy only for themselves, right? That means they can't, I guess they can pass around and share too, but the copy here is just for its own component to consume. And so, for example, I don't have another example here, but let's just say if A is injected at the root here, but then A can also be provided inside a particular module, like a component like A. If I do that, then A will have its own copy of this service here, and while the others will share the same service here. So you have its own copy in here. So this will take precedence. And so it's kind of hard to understand, this, I guess, until you actually go into the code and do it and then see how they works. So let's go and do an example to show you how services can be injected into other components at the root level and Angular. All right, so here is our app. We're going to use this to do an example. Now I'm going to go and modify this register page to add a registration form. I will grab the form from maybe just from this template-driven form. It will modify it so that will show the same information about these users we created in the earlier videos. So let's go and do that right now. And so make sure your app is running. And then I'm going to go to the app here and all these components here, I don't need that about for now. So I'm going to go and create a service. Well, before we do that though, let's modify the data first, okay? So we have the user's data here. This is the actual data. So we'll assume that this is like a database system, for example. And then I have a user here. So this is just an interface, okay? So we use this as an interface that will have this data type. Now this is kind of very common, especially in TypeScript, because the TypeScript is you want to have your data type to be really strict, right? Have type, and that's why you have all these interfaces and so forth. And this is a way to kind of safeguard your code, make sure that your data is very consistent. So I create this service here called user.ts, and now I can use this IU user as an interface to modify my code. So I'm going to go and change one thing here just to make it kind of secure, I guess. I'm going to go to the top here and import that interface, and then It's not user, it's called user. Okay, all right, what's going on? Let's see. Did I do yeah, it's getting late. Um, should be curlies here. All right, so I'm gonna make this as a int type for this user here. So you put that right after the users, and then put a colon, and then the type would be I user. And this is an array list. You put that there. Okay, so you make that a strict type. So save that one there. Now let's go into the service here. Well, let's create a service, and service is gonna really easy to create. Actually, you can do that in manually. You can do it in the CLI, but I'm gonna show you how to do it in manually yourself, so that you know how to do it. But not that hard. So let's say I'm gonna create a folder in here, right? Somewhere, not a model, but in outside here, and I'll call it services. If I type that correctly, services. All right, and then I'll create a file here, and I'll call this just user.service. Very common to do like this, service. Okay, so what you need here is the injector. You have the injector.creator, injectable, I mean, and this injectable here takes an object. Okay, so an object in here, you see all these different properties here. One of these things you need is just basically the provide in property here. This provide in property here gives you three options, either the any, platform, or root. The root, the platform here I mentioned in the slide, is that when you pass data from one app to another app, right? You can do that because if you remember in the index file we're just dealing with one app here. If you want a different app, you just add another tag like this and give it a different app name tag, right? So app 2, and then I have two apps. And now how do you pass data between the two is through that injection. Okay, so so that is where that platform comes in. The any is usually used for lazy loading. We're not going to do that. So the one that you use most of the time will be just a root. That means you provide that services to the root component and let the handle and Angular will instantiate an object of this service to make it available across the entire application. And then just like any other file, you just export this as a class. Okay, so the class would be usually the user and then service. And then that's it, right? So what are you doing here is the point. What does this user service do? Well, let's just say that we're going to have this user go and fetch all the data from the user's data from the models, and then we pass that user around, right? So here I will go and create a user. Well, actually, let's import a user. Import the iUser interface. I might use that from the models and user. I also need to get the user data from the actual data. Okay, so those are two data set. And then now in here, so usually what do you do here? Well, basically you have things like getters and setters and things like that, and you also have functions to get the data from the user and so on. All right, so let's say that I want to write a function to get a user. So very typical. So you can write a function here to say a get user. This is a single user, so you can pass a user ID, right, to get a single user. And I'm going to make this a strictly type. The user I return will be of type user, iUser, right? That user interface for. It's a single user, so I'm not going to put the brackets here. It's single user only. Now notice when I put that, though, it says you must return a value because you make that strictly type. So if you don't turn anything, you put void here, right? Back to the strictly typed language. So here I'm going to return something. What do I return? Well, I return based on this ID here. The user ID is what? For example, let's just say that I want to fetch a second ID, ID of 2. How do I know that? Well, you have to search in here, right? Search and find ID, and then return this index. And then you can fetch the index through the service, the class. object. So I'm going to have a function here, a useful function, maybe to get the index, and based on the ID, I'm going to return just a number. So this one here is basically, I'm going to say let I'm going to return the index from the users. Find index, the user that matches its ID with this ID. If it matches that ID, return the index to me. And so here I'll say, okay, I'm going to return the users, at that index. So where this index, this get index, I pass the ID to it. Okay, so that returns a single user as the user type to whoever wants it. Okay, so that's that one. I will have another function here to get all the users. So this will be just get users with plural. And because it's plural, we don't need to get an ID. So just basically get everything. So here will be a collection. So you put that bracket there, right? And this is really simple. Just a return users. That's it. Right? Return everything, and then we're done. Okay, so we have those information here to use. All right, and since I want to add some data as well, I have one more here to add user. So here it's add user single, and when we add a user, you're gonna get a new user. It's gonna be of type user, a single type, and then in here we add something. I'm not gonna return anything, so you can say void here. Okay, you just add some data. And so we add data to the user, you would do just basically you push it to the list, right? So you can say users.push the new user. Okay. All right. So notice that right now I'm accessing this user here directly from the file. Now this is normally not how you do it. And I'll show you why. Because basically what I'm doing here, I'm accessing the actual data source, right? The data. And as you can see, this is basically, it's just an object. So be careful, because when you do access object, whatever change I make here, even though this is a service, because the way I made the connection here, it could be incorrect. Okay, so and so let's say that I am done here. Okay, so I'm going to go in. Inject the service to wherever I want to use them. So I'm going to use it inside the register component. So I'm going to go here, open that register component, and I just need to import the service and maybe the interface. So I'll do both of them. So import iUser from the, I think, models. And then user. Okay, and then the service, I can inject it into the constructor here. So when you inject services, you put it right into the constructor, and you make this as a private. And services, it takes a token. A token is really just a variable plus the type of service, and that is the token. So here will be a user service. Okay, it's kind of common to have the same name, except you put in lowercase for the first letter. The type will be just user service. So you kind of want to follow this convention, so it makes sense, because later on you have a lot of services, you don't know which is which, right? So now you see service is been injected here. Injected here. This is the token here. When it talks about DI token, this is what it is. It's just a reference to the type of service you want to inject into this class. So now this register component have access to this user service. That means I can go and fetch all these data, all these information functions here from this file. And this file here is a singleton. Okay, that means other components can share as well. So now I can say, all right, so I'm gonna display that information to the form, and then have the form been submitted and update the data. So here then I'm gonna have a user. This is just a single user for now, and this user is going to be the iUser type. Okay, this is the single user. I also want to have a user for this one here, so I can display on the page. So display user is going to be of type a user, but it's going to be a list. I do this way, so I'll add this data in the initializer here. So we initialize it. I'm going to say this.users is equal to this.users service. Oops. Dot get users, right? That's what I had this function for. Get all the users and then assign to this local variable here. Okay, so I can use that to display information. And then because I'm going to add some new information, I'm going to have here, say maybe handle submit, and I'm going to get this from the form field. It's going to be ng form type. Import that up here already, and then here I need to basically push the data to this this user here, right? Okay, or we're going to use that function to get that. So now when you load the data from the form, and so if you go over to the form, we're going to have a the same fields, and I think one of the things that you're going to do is the ID field. That's something you have to kind of figure out how to use it, because ID field is, you can have it so that you can, you know, insert it manually, or you can have it so that you can submit it randomly. And I'll just do it manually for this example here. So let's go and copy the form from the template driven first. I'm going to copy everything here. We'll modify it. We'll add that to the register component HTML. We'll keep the first line, maybe remove all of these here, replace that. And I don't need to do validation here, okay? So we're just going to disregard that for now. And I'll keep that requirements there still, but I'm not going to do validation. So I changed this already to say handle submit, and we do pass the F to it. F is this form. And then these are going to be, this is called first name, right? And this is first name. And make sure it matches the one in the code. This will be first name. I'm just going to call these the same so they're not confusing. I may not need it, but why not? So that's that. This will be last name, and then this will be last name. Okay, I'm not sure I want to need this. I probably don't need this for now. We're not doing any validation here. Okay, so that's that. And then down here will be email. And then I have one more for the title, I think. Okay, so just going to duplicate that. Down here, we'll make this the title. And title. All right, I think that's good. Then down the bottom here, this will be different, right? So user doesn't have that one has user ID. And then over here have the user first name. And I'm just going to put it together. First name plus plus user last name. Okay. And then the email or the title first. And then we'll put that in the parentheses for the email. Okay, so we can show that information to on the form as well. Okay, so when I submit this form, it comes in that order. I don't have the input yet. Let's make one for the ID. And we can make a copy here. Okay, let's see. So this is, well, you know what? I think my form is going to be really huge. I'll just randomize that form in the list, okay? In the source. So let's go to the register component here. And when the data comes in, so basically I'm going to get F value comes with all the data. And because it doesn't have the ID yet, I need to generate the ID. So I can get something like And right now, I don't really care about duplicates. Okay, usually you don't, but you want to check that. But let's just say I don't really care about duplicates. So here I want to say let ID is going to be a random between anywhere from let's just say 5 to what not 5, I mean to I don't know 100. Okay, 100. And then now we're going to add that to the F ID. It's going to be assigned to this ID. So now my F has all these fields, 4 of them, plus the ID field. And then now I can push it to this users. And then f.value. Right? So push that data, everything to the user, and then the users update it, and so on. So notice here I'm doing this way. I shouldn't be doing this way because that's not how you do it, right? So usually you want to use the service to get it. So let's change that. Instead of doing this way, I'm going to call the service to do it. So I'm going to say this user service dot add user. That's the one I'm going to do. Add f.value. Okay. Now this may or may not work. The reason why is because this f is not the type of iUser. We'll see. But let's just say I'm going to save that and run my code and see what happens in the browser. Okay, so let's go to the register page. So here are the users we added. We imported from the data source. I'm going to go and add some user here. So I'll say Abe, Lincoln, and then abe@l.com and CEO. Okay, so we added here with his ID of 55, and I didn't clear the form, which I should have. But if I do it again, just put like able here, and then we add a able here, and this is like a CTO. Add that. So you see that it's added to the data source, right? So it's working very nicely. But if you go over to the About page, you see that they are added here as well. Right? Because we did not, inject the service into the About page component. Why does it have it? I thought we didn't do that, right? So this is what I mentioned earlier about using the data as an object. Okay, because I'm changing the data here through this register page component. I did not touch the About component at all, but I still have access to the same data source. And this is because, our examples run a really simple example here. Notice that when I do the very service up here, I mentioned earlier that I'm using the direct variable here, right? So this one here has a direct link to the actual data here. And also, if you look at the About page, About also use the same file, the same users. And because of that, then if I change data here or anywhere else that had direct access to this data source, it will change the data. This is like the database, for example, right? So, and this, if that's the case, then there's really no point of using the service, I guess. Not much in this example. But usually in the real world application, you don't store services data here in the file. You store services, or this data from a remote site, right? From a server somewhere else, from a database backend, something like that. And then all these components, you don't want to rewrite, database in connection in every component to get that database. Usually you go through one service, right? And so now let's say that I'm going to change this a little bit just to make sure that we are actually getting a copy from the data source, and then only the data source is available through this service, okay? And so instead of doing this way, I'm going to change all of these to a local variable here. So I'm going to say a users equals, actually let's just do this first, type iUser. Okay, it's going to be an, iUser. And so you can't really just, let's be a list of users. All right, so to get a user, I'm going to go and use a, let's see, you can use a constructor. Well, I'm just going to do directly here. Okay, so I don't want to just do this. What I want to say, if you do that, it's not right, because this is the same thing as the about component, right? You just do exactly the same thing. I'm referencing the same reference of the same object, and that's not it. So I want to do is I want to mimic this example where we get this data source from a remote site. Okay, and the way we're doing here right now is we're using a synchronous the synchronous option because I'm using services connecting to all these components synchronously. Usually you don't do this because when you get data from a database or a different server, there's a lag in between, right? So you don't want your site to come to a stop and halt and waiting for the service to be retrieved. So you usually do this through the asynchronous method using observables. And we'll do that in a separate video. But for now, so instead of doing this way, I'm going to make a clone of this user. Okay, assuming that this is like a data coming from a different source. So I'll use a slice of the pie. Okay, that means I can make a copy everything from this list, from everything here, and then return that slice of all the objects to this user here. So this is now a copy of this only. It's not a direct reference anymore. Okay, and so now I'm going to change all of these to say this dot user users. Okay, so let's copy that and replace with this, this, and this. Okay, so now I have a copy here. This data source, it lives inside this service. So we're not going to touch this original file here at all. Okay. So if I make changes to this user and I'm not touching this, so it should not show up in the about page, is what I'm trying to show. Okay, so now let's go to the register page. So in here, so you can see that I actually get the data from the service, and this is the actual data we're going to show. So let's go to the browser again, and let's save this first and run it again. Okay, so originally this one has only 4 users by default. Let's go and register our user. Go Abe again. Okay, so we see that Abe added here. If I go back to the about page, you see that you don't see the Abe anymore, right? Because Abe is not in this list anymore. It's its own data source in the service. So in order for this about to have the same data, you must inject that, or you must consume that service. So the register has it. Now, to show how this works, I'm going to go and do one more thing to make this work, and we'll be done here. So let's say that I'm going to go to the, I'm going to just copy, well, that's fine. So let's go to the, we'll add one more, maybe to the child B component. And let's say I'm going to add that service here. Okay, I'm going to inject that into this service. Add this component here, user service. Same as before. And then in here, I'm going to create a users of type iUser. And it's a list. And then I'm going to inject that, or update that users to use this user service that get users. Okay, so it has a copy from the service. So what I'm going to change in the registration page, this child B should also have the same information. So I'm going to go to my page over here and just copy this, this last piece over here. Maybe not the whole thing, just the paragraph. Copy that and go to the child B template page, and we'll put right below here that information as well. So you can see that information shown in the child B. And so let's go and see if this works. So everything's refreshed already. Okay, so about the home page, as you can see, has the same copy as the one in the registration page. So 4 of them. About page also show 4 of them. And then the register, we add a new one, right? So Abe, Abel, Lynn, and then add. So it's a new data, and the about is that's not touched, and the B, you see that it's added to the B as well because B consumes that same service. Okay, so that's how services works and in Angular, and it's really, really important, really cool how to pass data this way because now, again, just one thing that we run the application this way, that data source or data service is available in the entire application if you consume that service. So if you have any questions, please do let me know. Thank you.